Mr. Mayor, it is 6 o'clock. Would you like to call the work session to order?
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Notice of a special work session of the City Council of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, September 8th, 2020. Okay, let's go for it.
All right, thanks, sir. This is the second of 2 scheduled budget work sessions for the fiscal year 2021 budget. In your work session last week, you focused on the operations of our various budgets. The way we've structured this work session is that it will focus primarily on capital projects in the various budgets within the overall city budgets of the city. So that's how we've gone about it in the last few years. It seems to work pretty well. And typically what we do is we started in the section at the very back of your budget book that's labeled capital and gaming fund projects. And we kind of go through it page by page, to some degree, project by project. So if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and get started in that way. And I am looking at page 205 of the budget. And that starts with general fund projects. Now, the projects that we have shown in the general fund as capital projects are projects all with a value of under $20,000. We just sort of, to some degree arbitrarily, but that's the number we've used for the last couple of years, say that if it's less than $20,000, it's actually shown in the operating budget of the general fund. If it's over $20,000, it comes out of the gaming fund. So shown on pages 205 through about the middle of page 207 are a number of relatively small capital projects, all under $20,000. We thought that to get started, rather than going through all of these somewhat small projects that are in the general fund, we ask you to just take a look at it for a minute or so. If anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to try to answer them, but we didn't think we'd go through all of these one by one. So I'll ask you to take a few seconds to take a look and let us know if you have any questions. So if not, are we ready to proceed to the Convention and Tourism Fund? Is that all right with everybody? All right. Okay, then. So we're in the middle of page 207 with some projects in the Convention and Tourism Fund. And we'll kick it off. I'll ask the Community Development Director, Sarah Copeland, to discuss these projects. Sarah?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Convention and Tourism Fund it does support some infrastructure development in addition to all the tourism events that we support in this fund. And we have 3 items here that are infrastructure related. The first is the gateway signage. The council adopted a gateway signage master plan in 2016 that established a design for new gateway signage around town. The first of these that we did construct was the gateway arch that's there at Armour and Burlington. That's the only arch that's planned. The rest of these signs are more traditional vertical or horizontal gateway signage. The The planned sign installation for next year is at Armour and I-35. This is a location that's right next to the new Quick Trip that's there at Armour and Ozark. As part of the development of that site, Quick Trip did dedicate a signage easement area to the city. So we have a location for this sign. This would be a vertical gateway signage sign. So what you see in the budget for next year includes both the final sign plans in keeping with the concept that was approved as part of the gateway signage master plan and construction of this sign at I-35 and Armour. Are there questions about this item? Zach?
Councilmember Clevenger? No.
Quick question. So the 224,000, is that just for the engineering and the monument, the sign there at the highway? Is there any other, is that the 224? Is that the total project cost?
Yes, that's the project cost, the total.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that project? All right, moving on, Sarah.
So wayfinding signage, you just did approve a contract for 4 wayfinding signs around the city. This would include the other 4 signs that we had planned for this past year. We were planning a kind of a half and half installation. So this would complete the first half of the wayfinding signs. Are there any questions about that? Okay, then the other item that's here in the Convention and Tourism Fund is Armour Road Phase 2. We understand that final decision about this is pending the virtual town hall later this month. But if you were to direct us to move forward or direct us to make changes, this item would allow us to do either of those.
All right, if no other questions, we'll move on to the gaming fund, page 208. So in this fund, we have several items that the council sees every year. One, just an item to cover unanticipated legal fees. If we have some kind of a project that comes up that we didn't already have contemplated or budgeted, then and we do have some necessary legal expenses, it just allows us to be able to make the payment using this sort of contingency amount here. Single audit costs. Oh, is that Councilmember Clevenger?
Yeah, quick question on this. Can you give us an example of what this has been, what this line item has been used before? I see other, funds that have the contingency and engineering funds and everything like that. So can you give us an example of what you've used this line item before, please? Thank you.
I don't know of a time, and I'm not saying it's possible that we have accounted some for this, but I think in general, we know where we need to spend our legal fees. So I couldn't tell you offhand that we've even had to use this. It's just there if we need it. But I honestly don't have an answer to you that here's a specific time when we've used that. There probably have been sometime in the last few years. All right. Single audit costs. So anytime that the city receives more than $750,000 in federal grant money, then we have to pay what's called, the term is a single audit. It's a special audit to account for how we spent the federal funds. We do expect, we actually budget this every year in case that comes up, but this year we really do expect to receive federal funds for the Burlington Corridor project. So almost certainly we will have a single audit this year. And that is what this budget is there to help pay for, or to pay for. The next item is administrative costs. So we do, in all of our various budgets, we've done a review and done a calculation of what the general fund contributes to helping to pay for various costs that are related to that fund. And in the case of the gaming fund, that calculation is $17,489. So this is a transfer we make from gaming to the general fund to pay for the various costs that we have to account for various gaming fund expenses of an administrative nature. And then lastly, sort of the same nature as what Councilmember Clevenger asked for before, professional services contingency. This wouldn't be so much for legal fees as it would be for, say, financial advisory costs or something that might come up related to an expenditure here. Again, this is not a fund that we typically dip into, but it has in the past been something that came in handy when some kind of an expense came up of that nature that we hadn't specifically budgeted for elsewhere in the budget. I'll move on to buildings and grounds, City Hall facelift items, and I'll ask Assistant City Administrator Kim Nakahoto to talk about this.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The City Hall facelift project is a multi-year approach to neatening, tightening, refurbishing, and upgrading the appearance of City Hall. Past items have included the overhaul of the restrooms in City Hall, as well as interior and exterior signage and painting, carpet repairs, those type of things. The expenditure that is proposed in the upcoming budget will focus on replacing the rusting second story east windows. As you guys are aware, right now it kind of looks like there is, looks like those windows have, it almost looks like they're crying, and that's kind of a result of both the rust that's coming off of those windows, as well as just weathering from when those faux stone facades were installed. So in order to address those stain marks on the faux stone facade, we need to replace those windows. And then we were proposing coating that faux stone facade with a coating. And in fact, we're talking to Ymca about what kind of coating options they produce that might work on that type of surface, and refurbishing the city council dais. So that would involve mostly cosmetic to the exterior, as well as adding some connectivity and power options to the other side of the dais, as well as possibly extending it out a little bit, removing the drawers that are underneath so that people at the dais can actually slide their chairs underneath that particular counter. So that is what is outlined in this year's project sheet. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
All right, thank you, Kim. And I'll ask the Public Works Director, Pat Hover, to cover the next three projects. Pat? Pat, are you there?
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute. Dang. Replace rooftop HVAC unit, police department, first floor. The police department HVAC rooftop unit that serves the first floor needs to be replaced. This unit has an energy recovery system installed in 2006, but has since been tripping more often, and the unit requires outdated and non-compliant R2 refrigerant. Any questions?
Councilmember Clark.
Just my usual. Have you looked into, in your bids, have they included any energy efficiency rebates?
We plan to go through that program with them, although we haven't ordered them. And so all of these are custom made. And so we plan to try our best to be a part of that program on all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just say it'll help your money to go a bit further, just to make sure you have that in the bid. I don't know if we make that like a contingency, but food for thought. Thanks.
We definitely intend to do that for this one and the next two projects. And as Pat said, these numbers are budget numbers. We haven't actually gone out for bids yet. So, Pat?
Yeah, replace two HVAC heat pumps at Fire Station 1. Fire Station 1 has two rooftop HVAC heat pumps serving the training area that need to be replaced. They were manufactured in 2003 and required outdated and non-compliant R22 refrigerant, like the other, and repairs have been needed several times over the past few years. There's no questions. I'll move on. Replace rooftop HVAC unit at police department basement. The police department HVAC rooftop unit that serves the workout room, locker rooms, and bathrooms located in the basement need to be replaced. The unit had major condensation coil problems with vibrating issues that caused the Freon to leak from the coil tubing. The rooftop unit's energy recovery system has been disabled because of frequent failures and the parts are no longer available. That's it.
I would just note that we are in the midst of a multi-year program to replace HVAC in our various city buildings. So you may have remembered that we've done so for the last couple of years. And you'll see projects like this for the next couple of years. We've moved things around some as it's become necessary over the last 3 years or so. But this is part of a multi-year program to get where we need to be as far as HVAC. So. Thank you, Pat. The next item is Town Square renovation. This was a project that was in the fiscal year 2020 budget, but it was deferred due to COVID. But back in May of 2019, the City Council we did have a work session, and the council indicated that approval of funding some renovations to Town Square. I think, if you've been back there, you know that it's underused and that a lot of the furniture is kind of tired, the pergola, and some of the plantings really could use sprucing up. So we've got a number of ideas for spending money to spruce that up and get it being used more widely and usefully than it is now. They would include replacing the pergola, picnic furniture and benches. Right now there's a sunken area where there used to be a fountain, and we are planning to actually bring that up to grade. And then opening the entrance to Town Square from Swift by removing and replacing some of the current landscaping. So the hope would be that we make that a more lively and welcoming place, and then that we would try to begin programming that for public events and letting some of the businesses and things do some events back there as well. So we do hope to be able to proceed with that after having deferred it this year due to COVID. Any questions? Councilmember Stewart.
Yes, while I do support renovating this, and I think it would be a nice area, I still don't think it's the year for it. We're not like we're going to miss anything because we don't use it. And with COVID still very active, and we don't know where our budget will end up. I know budget, because it's in the budget, doesn't mean it's going to be used if something would come up. But I think this is something could be put back to the next year's budget. That's just my opinion, until we find out at least where we're at on the incoming money.
Any council discussion? Mayor Stilo?
Yes, we're having a meeting with the Chapels people pretty soon, and I think maybe we could work that in with some of this. And I kind of go along with Rick that maybe this is not the time to do this, but I think we'll know more later.
Councilmember Clevenger?
That was my question, is if we'd had any contact with the restaurants in that area. I mean, it's something that, I'm not sure, it's kind of a luxury that we'd like to get done, but during COVID, we should be good stewards of the city money. So it's something that even if we didn't budget for, we could come back as a budget amendment. Is that correct?
Oh, sure. You could always do that.
Okay, so I understand the other council members' comments, and I'm trying to be frugal as well. So,
Councilmember DeLong.
So to kind of follow up on those previous questions, any idea what the timeline is on getting this project done? Is this something we're considering like in the next month or 7 months from now?
Oh, probably spring is when we would be aiming for. I don't think we can get it done before winter, no, sir. So we'd probably be working on that over the fall and winter to get some kind of a bidding out for the spring.
All right, thank you.
So I should, have probably mentioned at the outset, but I mean, this is an opportunity. If there are any projects in here that you believe are best deferred or cut, this would be the time really to tell us, and then we will make any changes that you might indicate for the final document, which will be the adoption of the budget, which we plan to have you at the last meeting of this fiscal year, which is next week, September 15th. So are there any more thoughts about, and one way that we might go about getting a straw vote from you is just to actually ask you to vote on certain projects if there's a proposal for that. Councilmember Farr and then Councilmember Smith.
I'll go along with Rick. I mean, it's a project that needs to be done. I don't think it needs to be done at this moment in time. The COVID still, I mean, it's going to be with it until after the first year. Hopefully it's gone by then, but who knows?
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I hear what everybody's saying on that. The only reason I would see keeping it around is it is an outdoor space that could be used as a place for restaurants to expand their seating capacity if it was redone, and for people to have small outdoor gatherings when indoor is a little bit more of a problem. So I could see it going both ways, and if we're being good stewards, it may make sense to defer.
So, Councilmember, Mayor Stila.
Well, could we wait on this until after we meet with the chapels people?
Well, you do need. I mean, that meeting doesn't occur until after the Mayor Stila is referring to a meeting that chapels has requested, where they have asked for fairly extensive use of that area for their purposes. But that meeting won't occur until after the budget's adopted. So my recommendation would be that if you're unsure of this project, that perhaps you take it out now. It can always be added back in. But we would need a decision before that meeting that's to occur. Councilmember Stewart, and then Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, I think, and reasonably so, we know what the restaurant would want. I mean, I don't see any reason for waiting either. They're certainly not going to say, yeah, let's wait. I mean, they're going to want it. And I mean, that's right. I would, if I owned that restaurant, I would too. But I think Eric's right. We need to either take it out or leave it in now.
May I ask, and again, these votes are not official, but they will give staff direction as to whether to include this in the budget that's before you for official action next week. Councilmember Clark?
I guess if we're all trying to, because obviously there are a few of us that are totally new to this, but if we're trying to create a bucket of kind of like need to haves, want to haves, have to absolutely have, I get it, for rooftop replacements, police department, they have to go to work no matter what COVID says, they're going anyway. Fire station, same thing. When we think about town square, I do agree it's an outdoor environment, but I think if we're starting to create sort of a bucket of things that are could go, since I believe we're trying to make up for like a 17% shortfall in our budget so far, right? Was that the number? It was like,
well, it's a different fund, so it's I wouldn't say that, but there's no question that our gaming revenues are we are budgeting our gaming revenues substantially down next year. Yes.
Okay, right, because this all comes from right. That's right, because this all comes from just a gaming fund. Gotcha. Okay, and so the other budget, there's no more talk about the other budget whatsoever as far as general fund, fire department, police department. That was all just for last week, or is that something that can
certainly you can have further discussion about anything you like tonight. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Tonight it looks like lots of all the projects. Okay. And we'll get to those areas. So I'll just wait till we get to them. So.
All right.
But yeah, so I guess I didn't get us any further. If you're saying we should like vote right now, I can't help but think like if there is an item that maybe could be put in a bucket for right now, someone notating so that by the end we know how many of those items exist and maybe prioritize from there.
Sure, we can do that. Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, I think it's something that is definitely an outdoor space, and I think it could be utilized. I think it's something that we could come back with a budget amendment in the future if we need to. Let's look and see how the meetings with the restaurant go and how the COVID goes. And I think it's something that we should definitely understand the project. We should maybe bring it back at a future date.
So we can do this a couple of ways. Either I could ask for the council to just give me a show of hands for including or excluding this project now, or we could make a list per Councilmember Clark's suggestion and then come back to you after you've gone through perhaps each fund and ask you which of those items that you would prefer to include or exclude. Shall we do that? shall we do the second? We'll just go ahead and go through the gaming fund projects, and I will get any thoughts that you have, and then we can come back through and ask you each project at that point, if that's all right. Okay, so we will put Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, just quick. You keep saying next week. I don't have anything on my calendar for next week. Are we going to meet on the 15th?
Yes, sir. That's the regular city council meeting.
Oh, that's right. I do have a C there. I thought there was another budget, but okay. Sorry.
No, sir. No, sir. But that, yeah, that is our last regular city council meeting of the fiscal year. So that's why we would have the budget on that agenda for your approval approval by October 1st. All right, well, we will come back to this project, but we will put it on a list to ask you about here after we've gone through all of the gaming fund projects. So the next item is the Community Development Office remodel. Sarah?
This is another project that was in this past year's budget, but was deferred in March due to COVID. I don't know how many of you have visited the second floor lobby, but if you come up to the top of the stairs, you'll find the front counter for community development there. This also serves as the public front counter for Public Works. If you want to get back to the Public Works department, you have to be buzzed back through the locked door. This space does not allow for very good customer service. The elevator for people who might need an accessible entrance is behind the doorway. So if you need the elevator to reach the second floor, you need to press the button and ask for the elevator to be sent down to bring you up. It does not allow us to roll out plans to discuss them with contractors or with other applicants. It does not work well for the submission of large plan sets. And our existing space is just not used very efficiently. So this project would remodel the community development section of the second floor, which would include the lobby area, offices, the kitchen, break room, and all of our storage area to allow us to have a more space efficient and customer service friendly setup.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Couple of comments. First of all, I've been up there. I've seen it. It definitely needs renovation. I personally would kind of like to do, is there any plans as far as drawings on how the renovation would look and the layout? Another question is you know, it's a great project, but it's like almost $500,000. Is it something we want to do this year, or do we want to do it in a future year? I know it's been put off though already. So go ahead, Sarah.
Your question about plans, we have done a fit study with an architect just to make sure that it would be possible to fit what we wanted into the space. That's really just a sketch showing one way to lay it out that would accomplish our goals. So no, because it was put on hold before we had done an RFQ for an architect, we do not have plans yet for this project. That would be part of this budget request for next year.
And to your second question, Zach, yes, I mean, this is an item that should the county, it's not absolutely crucial to be done. I do think eventually it's something we'd like to see up there, but does it have to use Councilmember Clark's previous nomenclature, does it have to be done this year? No, it doesn't absolutely need to be done this year. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, it's pretty much the way I think about Town Square. I'd like to see it done. $500,000 during economic downturns to renovate, to remodel something that's been that way forever. And I know things need to change, but I still don't think this is the year to do it. I'd like for council to think about that.
Councilmember Farr.
There was a remodeling done when? A few years ago on this upstairs?
That would predate my time with the cities. I don't know.
So Sarah's been with us. Sarah's been with us about 7 years. So
okay, so it must have been 8 years ago that it was remodeled. I'm with Rick. I don't think it needs to be done at this time. I mean, we can still function up there. It might not be to the best of our abilities, but there's $500,000 that I'm still leery of spending. We've got huge money coming up here. I mean, the water fund, the water plant's almost $14 million. I mean, I'm afraid we're going to spend ourselves down to nothing. That's all.
All right. Councilmember Smith?
So are most of the community development and public works people working from the office or working from home at this point?
Right now, we have 3 community development staff members who are in the office every day and 2 of us who are working from home.
Okay. And I guess my thought now is with the uncertainty of what work and, work from home, work from office, and the interaction with the public will look like over the next, we don't know what it's going to look like going forward at all. Would now be a time to maybe budget for some design type things, or wait until that normalizes and we know, is it going to be normal to have people come in and spread big plans, or is that going to be more digital review? It seems like we could wait for those dominoes to fall a little bit more in line before we set this in the budget, if that makes any sense.
I think I understand. What I would say is I understand completely what you're saying. I don't know that we would want to necessarily budget just design now. I would think that if you want to defer this project, we probably recommend deferring it in its entirety and taking another look at it next year, perhaps.
Yeah, Sarah, I hate kicking this down the road. I know it's something that's been a long time coming, but I think given the huge changes we're going through right now, it would make sense to defer.
All right, I hear that. We will go ahead and stick this on the list to come back to at the end of the gaming fund projects. And again, just to remind you, we're going to be going through a lot of funds tonight, but the next quite a few will be discussing about gaming. So we'll put that on the list. We'll come back to you for a straw vote here in a little bit. Could I ask Pat for you to discuss the next 2 items on page 211?
Yes, sir. Replace 2 small Exmark mowers, $35,000. These mowers are used for mowing on medians and hard to mow areas that large mowers cannot reach. They have a 360-degree turning radius. The existing units are old and no longer provide efficiency and reliability, and it's time to replace these 2 older units.
Councilmember Farr?
How small is small? 22 inches, 56 inches, 60 inches?
I don't have the answer to that, Mr. Farr.
I mean, when I think of small, I think of an 18-inch push mower.
Well, these are about $17,000, $18,000 each.
I understand.
Yeah, they're not very small. I just don't know the radius, the size of them. What we've always traditionally used, though.
So we're just going to buy something that we don't know what it is.
Well, we've been using these same types for years. They're not small. They do larger projects, but they are small enough to go on, for instance, the Swift median.
Okay, didn't answer my question, but
I'll see if I can't get a little bit more specific information about the 2 mowers, sir. These were provided by the municipal services superintendent, and honestly, I'm not sure that Pat, is that familiar with the individual pieces of equipment. If we had the superintendent on, he could probably answer your question. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I've seen them. They're not small. They're just small compared to the big ones. I mean, they're not like my lawnmower from my yard, but when they say small, that just means they're smaller than the giant ones. To anybody else, I think they would be considered large.
Any other questions? Councilmember Toll?
Can we get away with buying one right now, or are they both broken? I just couldn't tell from the write-up if one of them's more reliable than the other one. Could we just replace one, or do they really need to be replaced?
I think the feeling is that they both come close to being at the end of their useful life.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the mowers? Councilmember Smith?
Not specific to the mowers, Eric, but when we get rid of these, we sell them at auction and we get a little money back out of them.
Yes, sir. We put them up for auction.
Is that net included in the budget, or are we just budgeting for the new purchase and whatever we get out of it is gravy?
So we budget a revenue from auction. We don't budget for items that we auction, but we do show it as a revenue. So we don't. This is not a net cost. It's a gross cost, and then we do get some kind of revenue from the sale of the old units if we're able to sell them at auction.
Okay, so the net impact will be a little bit lower.
A little bit lower, yes, sir. That's right. Any other questions on the mowers? Pat, next item.
Yeah, replace a F-350 4x4 truck. The current truck is a 2004 diesel with over 60 miles on it. Has a leak, an oil leak in the engine seal, transmission issues, and it's rusting. This vehicle is used daily, and it's also used for plowing snow. The new vehicle would be a gasoline engine instead of a diesel.
Councilmember Clevenger, and then Councilmember Farr.
What's the cost effectiveness between a diesel and a gas? As far as, does one last longer than the other? Gasoline cheaper? Can you speak to that, why we're buying gasoline instead of diesel this time?
This was suggested by the superintendent, and he knows a lot more about trucks than I do, but he says it's just not a good performance right now, and he'd rather go back to a gasoline engine.
Maintenance issues, Zach. Diesels take twice the maintenance.
There you go.
And they're about $10,000 higher.
Are they generally supposed to run about twice as long though?
Only if you're out on the highway where they're running at a constant speed all the time. In the city, they're terrible. Can I speak?
Yes, sir.
So is this where you said it's used for plowing and salting roads? Is this going to be an all-inclusive truck? So the plow and the salt spreader is going to come with it?
Oh, yeah. And we use it every day, too.
No. The $50,000 includes the plow and the salt bed for the back of it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there won't be any more costs. There won't be any cost for a plow or salt spreader for the back of it.
No, I should have mentioned that it does include that. It
This
does.
is all
So.
inclusive.
And lighting.
Okay.
Any other questions on the 4x4 truck? All right, moving on to the next item, amount necessary to balance community center budget. We are showing $700,000 this year. We are the community center. This kind of relates to the community center's operating budget, and we are certainly doing better than we did in years past, but we still have some fairly substantial expenditures that are involved with community center. We do pay a management fee to the YMCA for managing the community center. I have assumed a deficit in the community center budget of $200,000. Might not be that much, so we may not have to transfer quite as much. Or if we do, we won't have to transfer as much next year. But right now, according to the community center budget, this is the amount that's necessary to transfer to bring that account fund into balance at the end of fiscal year 21. Questions? Councilmember Stewart.
I'll just comment. Sounds like a lot of money, but we are saving a lot of money. This, if we still ran that thing, we'd be had to put in probably well over $1 million, maybe $2 million. So even though it's 700,000 sounds like a lot, I mean, we're saving money by them running it.
I would note we spent this year in the fiscal year 20 budget, we transferred $300,000. So if you look at what's budgeted in fiscal years 22 through 25, it's about $500,000 a year. I think that's kind of the way to think of it. That's about what it costs us when the YMCA is coming close to breaking even on an operational basis. Any other questions about that item? All right. And then the next item is possible YMCA capital item. So we always do budget $100,000 a year for items that might come up at the facility. Usually you may get 2 or 3 requests a year. This year, for example, there was a fire pump that needed replacing, and the Y came and asked for the money to do that, and the council approved that. So this fund here for $100,000 is for items that may come up over the course of the year, generally of a repair nature. but in the nature of capital, not always, but in the nature of capital items at the for the building, which we still continue to own. Any questions? All right. Next item is Walker intersection improvements. Sarah?
This project is for geometric improvements to the intersection of Armour Road and Walker Road. This would include realigning turn lanes and adding eastbound left turn lane queuing capacity. The engineering design was done by McClure and was finished shortly before we put projects on hold when COVID hit. So the plans are ready to go out to bid, and this would allow us to move this project forward for construction.
Any questions? All right. Pat, could you discuss the next item? Pat, are you muted?
I am sorry. I have before I begin, I've got the answer to Mr. Farr's questions. Those 360 radius mowers are 52 inches wide.
Thank you.
Thank you. Armour Road redevelopment area mowing and landscaping maintenance, $26,000. This includes landscaping maintenance of mowing, weeding, maintaining the sprinkler system, and timely applications of herbicide and pesticide on the shrubbery and other plantings. I will say that landscaping project this size, my staff have never encountered being responsible for. And we found that sprinkler systems, maintenance of sprinkler systems has been very expensive because contractors are breaking them all the time while the development is going on. So any questions?
Councilmember DeLong.
Why do we have this, show this budgeted for the next 5 years? How much money does Community Improvement District have right now? Do we know?
Oh, very little. You approved a CID budget not too long ago for that, but the only business right now that's getting any sales tax revenue is Old Chicago.
But I mean, we're going to have businesses before 5 years generating more though, right?
Well, hopefully. The idea would be that the CID would begin taking over some of the costs of that maintenance when there's a greater level, more than 50% of the properties is owned by a private business.
Making more of a shared cost in the future instead of it being all on us or all on them, as we kind of transition into more, as it gets more developed.
Yes, I mean the hope would be that's like we're just assuming that we will have to continue for the foreseeable future, but it's possible that we won't need to spend as much in the future years.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
So, Pat, you mentioned these contractors are breaking the sprinkler system. Why is it not their responsibility to repair said sprinkler system, or their insurance coverage wouldn't handle that?
Right. What we have identified several breaks and which contractors did them, and they did take the responsibility and replace them. But there's a couple that were not identified who did it, and they happened to be, we just had to rebore and reinstall areas that were broken by unknown contractors. One of them we think was a utility that went down the middle of the street.
Okay. Without, I don't know what guessing numbers or placing blame, but is there any spot we could just put a camera up that would be less expensive than replacing a whole bunch of sprinkler systems that people won't take responsibility for?
Well, you know, that may make sense, but what we do now, we have two different people driving that area constantly now, looking for, and we're also looking at any subcontractors doing any work, and we flag them, and we're gonna, you know, we're following it a lot better. But I'm not sure if, you know, cameras would work or not.
Something to think about.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions on the mowing and landscaping maintenance in the Armour Road area? All right. The next item is professional services for this area. So we have very good legal and financial professional help. We have very complicated arrangements, as you know, in the Armour Road redevelopment area. We have an industrial development authority for the TIF bonds that have been issued. We have Chapter 100s in place. We've got lots of things that work pretty well, but they all do take a lot of money to maintain from a legal and financial standpoint. And so we do have a significant amount budgeted to pay for the services that might be necessary over the course of the next year as that area continues to develop. And that's what this amount is for. Any question? All right. Sarah, could you cover the next item, please?
The Burlington Corridor Complete Street Project Phase 1 is the construction project to install a two-way cycle track, sidewalk improvements, mini stormwater improvements, new bus stops on the east side of Burlington, and other improvements associated with the Burlington Complete Street design. The city will, so what you're seeing in the budget for next year is the total cost, estimated cost of Phase 1 improvements. We will receive federal surface transportation priority funds that will offset some of this cost. The STP program is a reimbursement program, so we will be reimbursed for our construction costs here up to $3.8 million. MoDOT has also agreed to contribute $262,000 for the roadway surfacing that will be done as part of Phase 1 construction. Be happy to answer any questions you might
have. Councilmember Clark.
So the 262, that's also none of the extra funding is calculated within this. It's a spend first, and then you can be reimbursed 262 in addition to the 3.8.
Well, we really haven't discussed those MoDOT funds in that detail. They may write us a check, but the STP funds, that operates as a reimbursement. We spend the money and then we are reimbursed from the STP fund.
Either way, the 262 isn't considered in this budgeted request. It just would be a nice to have.
I'm not sure.
Like it's not accounted for in these numbers. You haven't accounted for like getting it.
The $8,375,000. That's the estimated cost.
Mm-hmm.
It would be offset by the 3.8 million and the 262,000.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Councilmember Smith, and then Councilmember Saper.
So we're looking at potentially getting 4.6 million back, and then this is a big number, 8.375 million. Is that inclusive of contingency? Because with budgets with a number that large, I expect a decent amount of swing when the bids actually come in.
This includes a contingency amount, yes.
Do you know what size that is?
The contingency is just over $1 million.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Saper.
My concern is that this whole Burlington Corridor Complete Street project, in some ways, is continuing on what people say at the Armour Road meeting that's coming up later this month. If there's a very strong effort to not go along with the current project, maybe even remove it, it may impact this project as well.
Well, these are two different projects.
Yeah,
I know. I know the two different projects.
We'd have to respectfully disagree with you on that, sir. We really don't think that even if the council were to say go back to where we were completely on the Armour Road project, we don't see this project as being affected greatly by that one way or another. We really do see this as being a completely separate project. It's not contingent upon what happens with Armour Road.
Oh, I understand that. I'm just saying if people's attitudes toward these projects change, then it may impact it.
I'm going to call on Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Stewart.
Just a brief response to that. So a lot of I read through about half of the comments that we got for the Armour Road project today. A great number of the complaints talk about removal of the traffic lane and the parking added. Burlington, we don't lose any lanes at all. So it's the biggest bone that is of contention is the loss of travel lane, and this wouldn't include that. So that's why I see it as a pretty different proposal than what Armour was. This isn't about traffic calming. This is more about creating green space and multimodal transport.
Councilmember Stewart.
Pretty much what Jesse said. This is, I mean, everybody knows me, I don't like Armour Road improvements, okay? But the Burlington is altogether different. You're not taking anything away from the traffic. The bicycle lanes are up where the, kind of an addition to the sidewalk. So they're out of the traffic. And if you look at the pictures, I don't see really, it's a lot of money, yes, but Burlington has been ignored forever. And if you look at the pictures, I think it's going to be a really nice addition. And it's not taking anything away like Armour does. You got to admit, it takes some away and gives it to somebody else. But we're not talking about it right now. So, but it is totally different, I think.
Anything else on the Burlington Corridor project? Councilmember Tall.
I would just agree with what Councilmember Stewart said and Councilmember Smith. And I was just doing the numbers based on contingencies. Like best case scenario, you might be looking at 3.3 million when it's all done. If you got everything back that you're going to get back and you don't use the contingency, which sounds way less scary than 8.3, and it could be anywhere between that number. But yeah, we'll hope for best case scenario.
Councilmember DeLong.
And if I recall correctly, part of this project is to help, will help with some of the water drainage issues along Burlington as well, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next project. And Sarah?
Downtown streetscape improvements is another project that was put on hold in March. This is a update to the downtown streetscape on Armour between Buchanan and Fayette, and on Swift from 18th to 21st Avenue. This would include replacement of the sidewalk pavers, new landscaping, new irrigation, new street lighting, street trees, and other amenities. Our existing streetscape, including the pavers and the trees, is reaching the end of its life cycle. Our existing irrigation lines have required extensive ongoing maintenance to keep them in working order. And we lost a number of trees when the May 2018 fire at Armour and Swift happened. This is a project where we had engaged a Confluence, a local landscape architecture company, to help us with the design plans and to assist in the contractor procurement process. And then the project was put on hold in March. So this would move that project forward next year.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Refresh my memory, Sarah. Is this the phased approach, or are we doing this all at once?
No, council directed us to move forward with an all at once
Complete project.
construction.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there any in the future, any streetscape past Fayette for further down past like by the Y and further on down that way?
We have not planned any at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else on downtown streetscape? Mayor Stila?
I kind of feel like that this maybe is one that we could put in that bucket and vote on a little later. I don't think we really need to do this right away. We don't know what's going to happen with that vacant lot there, and that could, we could do a lot of work there and it will be all tore up. So I'm not really in favor of it.
Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, it certainly does feel like a bit of a discretionary spend. The reason I would maybe advocate for keeping it on the budget is because we condensed it into one phase to minimize disruption to the businesses well, they're all really disrupted right now. So if we get it mobilized while business isn't in its normal swing and we get everything done, we could actually really minimize the disruption to what could happen there. But it's a tough pill to swallow. $3 million is a lot at a time like this. So that's a difficult call.
I'll put that in the bucket, so to speak, for consideration after we get through the gaming fund budget. Anything else on this project? All right, Sarah, next project.
The next project is city-initiated demolition, boarding, and abatement fund. We do, not regularly, but sometimes have a call to, particularly to board up vacant or abandoned properties to prevent people from entering them who should not. We have not yet had to demolish a house that is in dangerous condition, but I know that there are cities who sometimes have to do this on a regular basis. So this is a fund to provide community development with the funds to do that when it's necessary. As I said, we do more boarding than anything else, but it allows us to take action on properties that are in dangerous condition or an eyesore in their neighborhood.
If no questions, I'll move on to page 214, the Hillside Litigation. This is a project which I think all of you have heard from the city councilor at one point or another. This is litigation that's been going on for more than a decade, but which is still in the court system. And so while it remains there, we do budget an amount to pay for costs of litigation that may come up over the course of the next year. And it's my hope that at some point we will be done with this litigation and we can move on from it. But for right now, it continues. Any questions? All right. The next item is an item which we have put in the budget every year, just in case it becomes necessary, or because if the council just decides it is time for us to move forward. And that is a demolition of the Purina mill. You're all familiar with it. We have declared it a dangerous building. Well, it's not in imminent danger of collapse or anything, but it is a building we don't want the public getting access to, and which we certainly do not believe is any longer has a useful life. It is an eyesore. So we do put an amount in for the time when we decide to move forward on this. The amount is, we got an estimate a few years ago. It was around $3 million. And then I added to that a couple of years ago just for inflationary reasons. So it's hard to say if this is a sufficient amount to actually accomplish this work. It is a difficult demolition if and when it occurs, because it can't be taken down all in one piece. It has to be taken down in a piecemeal manner. So that's what that amount is for. Councilmember Tull.
I don't have experience with this, so I was wondering, if we spend $4 million to demolish it, do we assume the land, or does the land still belong?
I think if we were to move forward on this, then realistically, we would probably need to acquire the property first.
And would that be included in the 4 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just checking.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, of course, I think it's something that could be put in the bucket. I don't think it's going to fall down anytime soon. It burned for 30 days once and it's still standing. So, and the land, I don't think, respond to Lisa, is going to be worth anything to anybody else. I mean, other than the ones that have to buy it, us. It's in the middle of the rail yard, and I don't know. It's a mess. I know it's going to have to come down, but I just don't think it necessarily is going to be this year.
Councilmember Smith.
Two things on this one, Eric, and you and I discussed this one a bit. So first, I would encourage, since we haven't gone a few years, or it's been a few years since we got a bid, we could probably go out and get a bid again, so we could tighten that number up. It may come in quite a bit lower than what we're looking at here. So just have a good number there. And if it does come in really low, maybe we just jump on it then. The other thing is, and you mentioned this to me, that somebody bought it at the tax sale because it had been in delinquent status. So it's kind of in that flux state. But actually, I believe because it had been so far delinquent, only certain types of properties were sold at the most recent Clay County tax sale, that they would just immediately assume possession. So whoever bought it, if we know anything about them, or we could reach out to them and find out what, if anything, they have planned for it, I think that would be a beneficial conversation for us and for this budgeted item.
We do intend to try to get a hold of the current owner to have that discussion. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, I agree with Jesse's point of, I think if you did go put it out to bid, knowing, there are lots of companies that are without work right now, that they would love to jump on this potentially to fill their schedule, get some guys back to work, gals back to work. The other thing is, I don't know, there's also thought of parts and pieces. If there was just a portion that was demolished, if we're not really in a rush, just sort of piecemeal it out of whoever can fit it into their schedule, tear out a certain part, give us their budget if they're already in the area, things like that. I mean, I'd be open to that versus like the immediate, like we said, expenditure or approval, 4 million.
So a couple of points, if I may, and then I'll call him Councilmember Stewart. With regard to getting bids, we don't, just a reminder, we don't own the property. Mm-hmm. So it'd be hard for us to actually put something out for a hard bid for property we don't own. We can try, we could perhaps get a consultant to do some work for us to give us a good estimate. But putting it out to bid is, until we actually own the property, would probably be problematic. And I do think that when the property comes down, it needs to all come down at one time, and we couldn't actually take it down in a phased approach, I would say. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I expect it's going to be a lot more expensive than the other, 2 mills that came down in our new area. The location's what's terrible, and whoever bids it, they're going to be restricted. And you never know, the railroad may want paid for shutting their lines down, as it's coming down. And of course, you can't really take it down piecemeal, because then you make it more dangerous when you leave it. So that's all I got to say.
I will put this in the bucket for discussion at the conclusion of the gaming fund projects. We can discuss that further. The next item is the I-29 shared use path. Sarah?
So this project is construction of an off-street shared use path connecting the south end of Diamond Parkway to the eastern terminus of 14th Avenue, which was recommended in the bicycle master plan. One of the goals of this project is to provide a connection between Diamond Parkway and 14th Avenue that would keep bicycles and pedestrians away from the intersection of 16th Avenue and the interstate off and on ramps there at 16th Avenue, and would provide a better connection between the rabbit hole and destinations in 1 North. The project for next year would provide for some engineering and engagement to determine an exact route for this path, because the master plan identified 3 possibilities, and then to prepare construction documents that would be ready to go out to bid in a following budget year.
Any questions? All right. And Sarah, the next project is yours.
So for North Kansas City in general, there are very few places where it's possible to cross the interstate. So it presents quite the barrier to east-west traffic through town, particularly for people who are riding a bicycle or on foot. This project would look at how we could make improvements to Armour Road underneath I-35 to provide a better east-west connection along Armour Road. This was one of the top priorities for people who engaged in our bicycle master plan, providing a better connection underneath the interstate. This project is just to determine what the possibilities are for that connection and to coordinate with MoDOT on what might be possible here. I will note that staff has made a grant application to Mark's Planning Sustainable Places project related to this item, and we do expect to receive a grant award which would offset the cost of this item. At this point, we think we might receive $30,000, and we would need to provide match funds in addition to that.
Councilmember Farr.
You know, I don't want to do anything until MoDOT says we can do it, because we can spend all this money and then MoDOT will say, nope, you're not coming underneath my bridge.
Right. The purpose of this would be to do that coordination with MoDOT.
So I have to spend $40,000 to talk to MoDOT?
Well, no, to
stand this.
The purpose would be to coordinate with MoDOT on what they would allow and to put together conceptual plans for what would be possible.
I don't want to do any plans at all. I want to talk to MoDOT first. So it's going to cost me $40,000 to talk to MoDOT?
The $40,000 is not to talk to MoDOT. The $40,000 is to do further engineering work in public engagement in coordination with MoDOT to determine what improvements we could then put underneath the overpass.
So we're going to spend the $40,000 and MoDOT might say no.
So if I might, Mr. Farr, if MoDOT said they're not interested, I think we have some reason to believe that they
right.
might be.
The area engineer provided a letter of support for our grant application. They're willing to participate in this study with us.
Councilmember Tull and then Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, I understand needing to come to MoDOT with some plans for them to make a judgment on. And I just wanted to say thank you for doing the grant writing. I think there are a lot of grants out there that we could get our hands on for lots of different things like the library did in this grant. So thank you for doing that work.
Councilmember Clevenger and then Councilmember Stewart.
As far as, you know, that underneath the bridge there is pretty rough right now. As far as pedestrians, I mean, even if you're not a cyclist, a pedestrian, it's not real safe. So, I mean, I think it's worth looking at. I mean, definitely we need to coordinate with MoDOT for sure. What's the matching funds as far as, you said we're going to maybe possibly get a grant for $30,000. What is our matching funds? What would that look like, Sarah?
The minimum required matching funds is 20% of the project total. So if we were to receive $30,000 in grant funds, we would need to provide at least a match of $7,500. Now that would be, you know, less than our estimate for the project. So we could match more than that, but we would not need to, you know, spend all $40,000. We could, you know, we could just spend 10 and still do the project that was recommended by the Bicycle Master Plan.
And I'm sorry, I'm not sure who was next. Councilmember Stewart.
Yes, just something to think about. I don't mind, you know, making a pathway underneath the bridges for pedestrians or bicycles, but something I brought up before, and MoDOT's never done anything about it. I've brought it up at meetings several times, is water pools under their bridges. There's no drainage, and people walking or on bicycles not even when it's raining, but when the water's there, going to get drowned because the cars go through the water and they throw it up where these people would be walking. And evidently MoDOT doesn't care because I have brought it up before.
Anything else on this project? All right, Councilmember Clark.
I'm for it. I get it. I understand the concern in dealing with MoDOT, but it sounds like they're engaged. But I do think we have to do something. I walk my dogs and ride my bike under that bridge, kind of at my own risk, but walk my dogs to be able to connect down to downtown. And I know Ward 4 doesn't really have much connection, and that's a big push in my area. They'd like to see some sort of connectivity to tie us into North Kansas City a bit more. And I appreciate this initiative.
All right. The next item is temporary parking for the 18th and Swift project. So on your next agenda, September 15th, you will have numerous items to finalize and bring to the brink of start of construction, the apartment project at 18th and Swift. And so there will be numerous items before you for approval. And two of them will be parking agreements with two different entities. We have heard during the course of public meetings for this project that have occurred in the last few years that people are concerned about losing parking during construction. So what council asked staff to do is to try to find alternative parking in the area that people might be able to use during construction. Of course, we will be replacing about 125,000 spaces pre-construction with about 75 spaces post-construction. But during construction, all of those spaces, the 125 spaces would be lost. So we will be bringing to you two parking agreements, one for some property that is immediately adjacent to that site, and one about a block over where the bowling alley is. More spaces for the bowling alley, quite a few more than for the space that's next to 18th and Swift. So the cost of those two parking agreements that will be before you is $22,800 in the next year, and we've placed that cost here. Councilmember Clevenger.
During the construction, do we know how many public parking spaces we're going to have with all the agreements that we have with the private entities?
Oh gosh, I believe it's more than 125. And Kim, I'm sorry, I know this has been your project and I don't know if you have that number at your fingertips, but.
Yes. So with the one agreement, we'll have 192 24-hour parking spots. Another one will have 100. That will be nights, weekends, weekday nights, and then weekends. And then another, and this number I'm pulling from my head, but I believe it's another 22 24-hour spots included. But I am solid on that 192 24-hour spots.
Thank you. And then as far as once we're done with the construction and it's up and running and we've lost, we've done the 125 down to 70 some odd that we have now. Is there any possibility of continuing some of those parking agreements so that we can have additional parking in the area once the garage is built?
I guess that's something council could consider at that time.
I think it's something we need to look at if we're losing spaces. And I understand, I like the project. I want it to go forward. I just want to make sure we have sufficient parking downtown.
As when we get to that point, we'll bring that to council for your consideration if the parking is still available in those locations. But at least that's what we've got for now. Any other questions? All right. And at this point, I will turn over the next several projects to the Fire Chief, Dave Hargis. Dave.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The first item there is our feasibility study for our training facility. It's been in the budget for the past couple of years. The first year we had some problem getting things together, and this year as we were getting ready to send out the RFQ, the COVID situation hit and kind of took precedent over this. And this is to do a feasibility study in the area of the waste treatment plant about putting in a phased training center down there consisting of a concrete pad and some buildings going up in a phased plan over several years if the feasibility study comes back saying we can do that. This is just a continuation of that, and we're going to make it a priority this year to get that done. So any questions on that? Okay, the next item is a new fire inspector vehicle. Currently, our fire inspector drives a 2010 Escape. We've been having some maintenance issues with that. And to go along with our cancer initiative, we've been trying to get all of our vehicles where we can store our bunker gear in a separate area than the passenger compartment. And this would be for a Ford Ranger or similar sized pickup truck with a camper shell in the back for him to use. It would be a 4-door 2-wheel drive that he utilizes through the day to drive to the businesses and do fire inspections. And also he is actually our fire investigator as well. So he comes in and responds to fires with that when he does his investigation. So that would be a replacement of that with a newer vehicle. Do you have any questions about that? Okay. The next item is $285,000.
Dave, I'll interrupt you. Councilmember Clark.
Yeah. Sorry, right quick. And that vehicle, that's covering the 5 square miles, or does that go beyond?
No, just the 5 square miles. It stays at the station, and when that individual comes in or somebody comes in to do a fire investigation, they take it and it's just used inside our area, unless on occasion our fire inspector is asked to do mutual aid with other departments to assist in investigations. But 5 days a week, it's just inside the city limits of the city.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The next item is a replacement of our of an ambulance. Right now, our reserve ambulance is a 2007. It's got almost 55,000 miles on it, which doesn't seem like much until you factor in the abuse it took on a daily basis when it's frontline. It's also becoming problematic with maintenance, and this will be to replace that as well. So, and then we would move a newer ambulance into reserve, and we would have 3 really good apparatus in our fleet at that time for our EMS. Yes, Councilman Clark?
Are these the F550s?
Yes, this would be pretty much a carbon copy of the 2015 F550 we purchased in 2015.
And if I remember correctly, that's through the company where if anything needs to be serviced on it, it goes to Midway Ford?
Actually, we've been using Thoroughbred Ford at this point.
I mean, to a Ford dealership, even if it's for the box part up to the front bumper, they can fix it all there.
The box part is under warranty, and we have a company that works out of Grandview that does our warranty work on that.
Okay. That's all.
Councilmember Clark.
Sorry, this ties into a question I meant to ask last week. I'm just wondering if it's like a federal thing. What I know when there is a response. So say someone's not breathing, ambulance shows up, fire truck shows up. Is that like an every time? Is that a thing that we as a community decided that we want to make sure we do? Or is that, and I know this may be a dumb citizen question, but I'm just curious. Like when I see 1 or 2 ambulance show up to the same location and a fire truck, is that just an automatic response that it's always fire truck, always ambulance, no matter what?
That's a best practice of the industry. Most EMS responses get a fire truck and a single ambulance. The only time you're going to see 2 ambulances show up is if there are multiple patients to be hauled, because with HIPAA, if they're not family members, we can only haul 1 patient per ambulance. But it's best practice that the crews show up. We send the fire truck and an ambulance so that the ambulance crew has additional manpower if it's needed to carry the people out or do CPR or that type of stuff. It provides us in our what we call a response plan for different calls, get different types of apparatus and numbers depending on what it is, and those are all based on industry best practices.
Okay, thank you.
The next item in the budget is personal protective equipment. We replace our fire gear every 10 years per industry standards and the manufacturer's warranty and recommendations. We do it on a 3-year rotation. This will be the 3rd year of that rotation and finish out. Everyone will have 2 sets of gear that's less than 10 years old. Each time they go on a fire response or hazardous materials response, they take 1 set, wash it, and they have another set to put on to finish out the shift. And this is just the 3rd year of that replacement. It's in our continuing ongoing, I believe in another 3 years, we'll start another 3-year process, and it'll cover all those so that we keep current on our PPE.
Councilmember Clark.
Obviously, I'm all for these funding. I just can't help but, since we are on the topic of fire and I didn't approach it last week, I was just looking through the numbers. If I read it right, 62 total fire crew, I guess, and then 42 are non-management. 20 of those are managers, from what I saw.
As far as
I'm sorry,
having
20
fire
additional
gear,
people are managers. Yeah.
those are not exact. They're supervisors, not managers. We only have one person on the department that's not issued gear, and that's our administrative assistant. Everybody else maintains a full set of gear.
Okay. And so it says, yeah, how many employees serve? It says fire and EMS is 90%. So how many employees serve that 90%?
That would be, if you want to look at it in the big picture, it's all of us. We have the 19 people per shift that actually run the calls. Then we have our fire inspector, our prevention division, training division, myself, and a administrative assistant.
Okay.
And myself, the training chief, and the fire prevention chief, we all respond to calls through the day when we're there, or at night we respond back to assist on fire calls as well.
And then the other quick question, who provides the health insurance? I noticed that the health insurance broke down to, it looks like roughly $12,800 per employee, obviously higher health insurance for fire. But I'm seeing, I don't know, I guess I just did a quick calculation of numbers of like, if we average the salary across the 62 people, it's 66,000 average salary, coming out to around 95,000 salary with benefits. If I'm looking at that right, because I'm seeing 12,800 per employee with health insurance. And then with the additional benefits, total benefits come out to about 29,000 a person.
We have all the same, we have the same health benefits as all the other city employees with the same cost, depending on the plan that the employee chooses or whether they're on their spouse or significant other's plan.
Okay. Oh, okay. So they could opt in, opt out, be on a shared plan, but there's obviously still coverage just for them being fire or police. There's what we're paying in, which is 12,800 average per person.
I'm assuming you're correct. I don't have that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think I was just looking at the overall, like, why do we have 3 battalions? I guess I just don't know the ranking so much either. I'm just kind of looking at that, and I didn't know if there was like a salary schedule that we could see for each level, or is that not something that's generally published?
No, we can provide that to you. The council has approved. In fact, we bring it to you every October. We bring to you the salary schedule for all city employees.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. Rick's going to come after me.
Councilmember Stewart.
Well, I just want to know, are we still on personal protective equipment, or are we on salaries and benefits? I'm getting confused here.
I know it's because I didn't question last week. That's what I prefaced when I spoke tonight, is I just didn't realize, in looking at it, I looked overall, I'm realizing, I'm looking at a shortfall of budget from the general fund, I guess, and it's questions I didn't get to ask last week. So it's kind of like, it's either going to come up when we go to vote on it next week, or I get it out of the way today and feel a little bit better about the perspective, I guess. And
from my perspective, I would certainly like you to have all your questions answered before the end of tonight, so that when the budget comes up before you next week, it's a yes or no question. Any other?
And Councilmember Clark, if you want to send me an email with some of those questions about the department you have, I'll be willing to answer them for you before next week.
Yes. And obviously you guys do great work. There's never questioning great work. I'm just looking at the breakdown and then looking at police breakdown and things like that, and just kind of seeing where budget goes. I appreciate it.
All right. Anything else on the fire projects from the gaming fund? All right. So the next item is IT supplies, fairly self-explanatory. Just during the course of the year, there may be a need for a new computer or some other type of IT items. So we do budget an amount to take care of what expenses that there might be to maintain the city's system over the course of the year. General liability insurance, I think that's also probably pretty self-explanatory. We have a citywide liability insurance bill, and this is the gaming fund's share of that. The next item is website redesign. I'll ask Kim Nakahoto to speak about that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As previously discussed, the city's website was redesigned in 2015, and at that time, the site delivered everything that the city requested. However, it is now 5 years old. It's 2020, and there's definitely some room for improvement. Several of the things that have changed over the years is an ever-changing issue is how people search for information, as well as how people access the city's website. When it was redesigned in 2015, we didn't have near the mobile rate we have now, and some of those shortcomings can definitely be seen in our current city website. As the council knows, we've had this discussion earlier about the city's website redesign, and the city issued an RFQ for website partners to move forward with on this project. The city staff right now is actually reviewing those RFQs to kind of help expedite the timeline of this particular project. This project is funded within the upcoming potential time period of the fiscal year 2021. So what we're doing right now is more due diligence work before we go through the process of discussing all of our wants and desires with the new city website and our expectations on how it should function. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Tall.
There's my mute. I was wondering, I must have turned my video off. In the people that when you're looking for someone to redo the website, have you found anyone locally, somebody in North Kansas City that could be hired?
So we did receive 16 RFQ proposals. I actually have not. We received those on Friday, and I'll be honest, I haven't had the opportunity to review them myself. It was open to any business that would like to have submitted an RFQ. So I'll be honest. We'll
just wait and see.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Again, we just received those, so I haven't had a chance to review them all yet myself.
I am all for a website redesign. Another idea, $50,000 is also a pretty good salary. If we go forward, if we were to use the money to hire somebody locally, even on an hourly basis, to kind of take control of some of the communication needs, that might be another way to address it. But I'm all for the new website and getting everything synced up. Thank you.
Councilmember DeLong.
So I'm not sure, what did you say a mobile application was part of this RFQ or not?
So part of the RFQ, it is not an RFP, meaning we did not solicit specific projects within this. What we wanted to do was get a better understanding of who could provide what and what that particular company specializes in. The mobile app would be part of that. Several of the submissions, several of the companies that submitted do have app as part of their scope of work. Again, what we wanted to do was have an understanding of qualifications and who best would be suited with to begin those discussions with, which is why we did a Q instead of a P.
Okay, and like you were saying, a lot of that stuff's driven by mobile now, because you've seen a higher mobile rate. And just as I was thinking through it, you know, when people want to go to report complaints, you see some of these apps in other cities, you know, they pull it up, the map's right there, GPS right to where they're standing, they're able to take a photo, submit it to the city, and from there it kind of goes in almost like a workflow tracking, which is, I don't know if that currently, how that works with our current website, but it definitely seems like there'd be some advantage to allowing people to report stuff on the spot, be able to show exactly where it is, and then also be able to workflow track it as well, just to make sure these things are getting done. So, I mean, that's something I'll follow up later once you get a little bit further in the project then. Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else on that? All right. The next item is regards our fiber network that we do have a contract with KC Fiber to operate our Link City network. We entered into that agreement in 2014. The agreement does provide that we will share in any deficits up to a limit of $150,000. And because it is our network, we also do pay certain expenses involved with it, such as liability insurance. So we do, to the degree necessary, transfer an amount into the communications fund from gaming to make sure that that fund is in balance. And this year, that amount is projected at $100,000. Any questions? Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, who does the locates now?
Our water department is still doing fiber locates, and that is something I think we talked about last week, that we may be looking at doing some kind of a contract out. But right now, the water department does fiber locates. Anything else on that? All right. The next item is a transfer to the Parks and Recreation Fund for general support. So as I noted earlier, we have figured out an amount that each fund pays to the general fund for services that the general fund provides to that. Parks and Recreation share of that is this amount, $144,717. And that is transferred from Parks and Recreation to the general fund. A decision was made a few years ago to make the park fund whole by transferring that very same amount from gaming back into Parks and Recreation, so that they do not actually pay that out as a net. So that is what that is for. Okay. And then the next item is the Wheel Park Trail in Ymca Park, which you all talked about last week when Parks and Recreation was there, and the council seemed to indicate support of that project. So there's where it's funded there, in the amount of $131,000. And for the next several items, I will turn matters over to the Police Chief, Kevin Freeman.
Thanks, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. First item in our request tonight is our annual request for police vehicles. We have $120,000 in this fiscal year for frontline replacement of our police vehicles. Just again, just regular every year annual rotation. Be happy to answer any questions on that. Okay. Our second item is Canine Replacement. This is the second year in a row you see this line item. It was a contingency line last year should we have to retire one or both of our dogs and replace both handlers. That did not occur, but what has occurred this year, as you know, is we have retired one of our dogs recently with the promotion of one of our officers to supervisor. So we will for sure need to acquire a new dog and a new handler this year. And we still have the extra, the full money in there in case our second dog, who is also getting up there in age, needs to be retired. That particular handler has told us that he is interested in continuing with the next dog if he's allowed to, but those things can change too. So that's the total cost of a canine acquirement, training, and training a new handler also. Any questions on that item? Okay. Our next item is police radio replacement. The current radio system that we're utilizing was manufactured in January of 2009. It's an 11-year-old technology. This item is something that we voluntarily pushed to the last 2 years ourselves and never presented the item to you for consideration. But the radios have actually reached the end of their service life now. So they are non-repairable. Anytime one of our radios goes down, it has to be replaced. And that's anywhere from about $1,500 to about $5,000, depending on the type of radio. The new radio system will comply with the new federally encryption mandate. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on that as well. Okay. Finally is our firearms replacement plan. This is just kind of continues how we typically like to replace our firearms about every 7 to 10 years. Again, this is another item that we have voluntarily pushed back twice and did not present to the council. This year, we're going to, if approved, we're going to transition from our 40 millimeter Glock handguns to a 9 millimeter Glock 17. It's a Generation 5 handgun, a little bit higher ammunition capacity in the magazines, less recoil, which basically means we can be more accurate. The ammunition is less expensive and easier to find. A 40 caliber ammunition has been hard to find for a number of years now. So be happy to answer any questions on that as well.
Councilmember Farr.
Kevin, do you trade your old weapons in, or do they get destroyed, or do they get offered to the police officers? Or
the answer to two out of three is correct. We do trade them in. We trade them back to the vendor that we buy the new ones from. And then we do allow our officers to buy their guns back from that vendor. Any guns not bought back by the officers are then sold in the resale market by the vendor.
Okay, thank you.
Sir. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. Next item is designing and engineering contingency. So during the course of the year, there often will come up some kind of civil engineering work for something that we hadn't anticipated during the course of the year. And so this is a small fund that we put aside just to help us with. Usually we would turn that over to our consulting engineer, which right now is Wilson and Company, to do some kind of minor design for us, and we use this fund to pay for that. Okay. The next item is one that we talked about last week, and that is the cost of the Metroflex service, which as I indicated to you last week, I no longer is sustainable out of the transportation fund, and so have put this amount in to transfer over for the anticipated cost of the Metroflex. Sure, we'll be having more discussion about that in the year to come. Anything else on that? All right. And then the next item, I'll turn it over to Pat in a moment, but Northgate Alley repairs. So we started running into problems, which Pat can describe to you a little bit better than I can, in the Northgate Alleys a couple of years ago. And they've turned out to be more extensive than we thought. We had budgeted $50,000 a year over 3 years. I think our initial thought was that should go a long way to correcting the issues that we've seen. But we did realize kind of late this year that that amount really was not sufficient. Would take way too long at funding it at that level to be able to accomplish the work that needs to be accomplished there in the Northgate Alleys. And so we have now budgeted for a 2-year project, $250,000 in fiscal year 21, and then the same amount in fiscal year 22, which we believe should be able to take care of the issues that we've seen there. Pat, would you like to describe that project further?
Sure. The concrete alleys within the Northgate area were constructed beginning in 2003, and they never did drain well. Pockets of standing water hold salt during the winter, and that deteriorates concrete in several areas. That's one big problem. The main problem is drainage. Installation of slot drains, extension of storm sewers, replacement sections of concrete so they drain properly has improved the drainage. And anyone that lives in Northgate area can see we've done some great improvements, but they're small. And this additional funding is needed if we wanted to get this done within the next 2 years. That's all.
All right. The next item is a capital projects transfer for water pollution control projects. So when we get to water pollution control, you'll see projects which total $875,500. Although we did indicate last week that one of those projects, the lab water filtration system, can be deleted. So that amount, the $875,500, would also be reduced by $9,500. So I would recommend this amount be reduced to $866,000 from the $875,500 that's there. But otherwise, as we've talked about, the WPC is having, it does have some serious issues. And so in order to fund the capital projects that we do see there, we have budgeted a dollar for dollar transfer to that fund. So we'll be talking about the WPC projects in just a little bit, but that's what this amount is to pay for those projects. All right. Okay. And then lastly, in gaming, before we move on to other funds, is just again a contingency amount just in case something comes up of a last minute nature that we absolutely have to do. we go to the mayor, we ask if we may use that fund for some kind of an emergency situation. And so that's what that fund is. All right. So at this point, I'd like to pause. As I said, the way to think of our capital projects is not as all of one thing. We're going through them all tonight, but it's really to think of it fund by fund. And we have just finished talking about gaming fund projects, and you named a number of them, which at this point I would maybe say we should come back and council can indicate if you'd like to move forward with them or not. And the four that I have down are a town square renovation at $200,000, community development office remodeling at $483,000, downtown streetscape project at $3 million, and the Purina mill demolition at $4 million. Those four projects total $7,683,000. And at this point, I would ask, maybe we can go through them project by project, and I might ask for show of hands, and you certainly can discuss it further if you like, but perhaps we can discuss the town square renovation. At this point, I would ask, is it the council's pleasure to remove this project from the gaming fund budget? Could I see perhaps a show of hands of those who would favor removing it at this time? So I believe I'm seeing a consensus to do that, and we will plan on removing that item in the budget that'll be submitted to you next week.
And that meeting with the restaurants and everything, that'll still go on.
Yes.
That's why we're just removing it from the budget, proposed budget.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
The city project. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The next item is the community development office remodeling project at $483,000. Could I see a show of hands as to those who would favor removing that project from the fiscal year 21 budget? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there does seem to be council consensus for that, and we will plan on removing that item from the budget. The next item is the downtown streetscape project at $3 million. Is there a consensus to remove that project from next year's budget? Can I see a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. So not a consensus, but is there any further discussion? Otherwise, I might just want to actually, call a roll just to make sure I can see where we are. So Councilmember DeLong and then Councilmember Clevenger.
I know initially we wanted to do it in one phase. Is it possible that we split it back up now and maybe take this in a little smaller chunks? I know, like Jesse said, trying to get it all done once, but is there some, at least financially, that we could do now?
Yes, sir. You could return to that if you wanted. I think the way we, and now I can't recall, but look it up in the budget. I think we had it at like 1 million, 1,500,000, and 500,000, something like that. So sure, if you wanted to return to a phased approach, you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I don't want to make sure it's a phased approach too, where, say economy doesn't recover, maybe even gets worse, that you're just not stuck with like half a project. Certainly want it in like complete phases, but I would be fine with looking at a phased approach to that again.
Councilmember Tall.
Whoa, what about me here?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Clevenger and then Councilmember Tall.
Yeah. Quick question. First of all, I know we looked at the phasing before. I know if we phase it out, it may be more expensive in the long run. I thought about removing it, but Jesse made a good comment about the businesses are already slow right now, so it might be a good idea to do it all at once. We don't know where we're going, but hopefully we can get a vaccine and kick this in next year. So that's my thought, is to leave it in.
Any other discussion? And Councilmember Clark. And then
was this also?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Toll and then Councilmember
sorry.
Clark. My fault.
Yeah.
I'm going out of order.
It's okay. I don't mind waiting. I was going to say I understand getting it done so that we're not in the way when everybody can go back to business. My only question is, in the area where the fire was on Armour, after hearing sprinkler systems and things getting broken in construction areas, I'm wondering if it'll cost us more money when they go into that section to build, if things would get destroyed in the process of building. That's my only hesitation on that.
On the sprinklers, I think that's really something that's kind of unique to Armor Road, to that particular area. I wouldn't necessarily think that issue would necessarily arise again for that particular site.
I just mean, just in general, those lots, they build right up to the edge, which I like, but I'm not sure if we were to put trees and things in there, if they would get destroyed, or maybe they would still be guaranteed within the first year of planting them. I'm not sure. That was my only hesitation. I think the mindset of getting it done, so we're not taking parking spaces and storefront, and we're making it easy for people to go back as soon as they're ready, makes total sense. I'm just curious as to whether or not, if we did anything in front of that lot where we had the fire, if that would get destroyed in the new build.
Generally speaking, when we have a contractor that damages the city's property, and that would include irrigation lines or planting or pavers or landscaping, the contractor is required to make repairs or replacements before they get a certificate of occupancy. The hard part in the redevelopment area is that some of that damage was done and we were not aware that it was done until the contractor had moved on and several months had passed. So in this case, there's a possibility that some damage could be done during the construction process, but if it were, we would, be
catch
able
it right
to.
Away.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would
Got
also
it. That
note
was
that at least when we were first discussing the Streetscape project, we were not making a whole lot of, investment in amenities immediately adjacent to those property lines.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that, Sarah.
So I'm gonna call on Councilmember Clark, and then I think it was Smith, and then DeLong.
Yeah, I would say that was my concern in saying, like, let's hold off, was that area for the fire. The mayor had brought it up earlier of just kind of, are we going to be overlapping when somebody then takes over that property, I guess, and what does that look like? But I can appreciate knocking this out. Obviously the big number is what throws me, but knocking this out does make sense to do it all at once, especially if it's, with the irrigation. We obviously need more street trees. If we're controlling, I want to encourage any new green space. And there's no way of phasing it as far as, just wanting to open up and getting everybody out of the way. But like you said, if that's going to be handled, that area where the fire was, if that'll be handled and we get them the plans that show all the irrigation that's put in place so that they are responsible for any replacement or damage, then I could see us coming back on board with this.
Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember DeLong.
So the area where the block there on Armour and Swift where the fire happened, if we try to wait around until something goes there, we might be waiting for a long time. There's been some sniffing around, some interested parties, but we don't have a timeline on it. So given that Sarah has told us that it'll get fixed and we don't have anything specific, we may as well move forward and go ahead and get it fixed up.
Councilmember DeLong.
You knocked out half of what I had. The other one was, what's the timing on this project as well?
So if council wants to move forward, the next step we need to do is to get out an RFQ for construction, or an RFP for a construction manager at risk. And then once we get that hired, I think we'd be looking at spring, summer for a start next year.
Okay. So, I mean, if again, with some sort of economic downturn, we could still fail for the next several months. I mean, you're not going to turn this around.
Not right away, no, sir.
No. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I have some questions. I can't remember from the drawings. Is this work going to go down Armour as well as Swift? I think it is. And I noticed today, I happened to be driving down Armour about 12:30, and there was quite a few cars on the straight in parking where the restaurants are and all that. They're picking up business. I'd hate for this to take effect and drive it back down. I know the restaurants are probably at 50%, but those parking places were pretty full. There was only 2 or 3 openings when I drove through. So I wouldn't want to do anything to hurt the businesses right away. Of course, you said that's not going to take place until spring, and who knows what's going on in spring. But all right, that's just a comment I had.
Anything else on that? And then I'll go ahead and sort of call the roll and try to get a feel for where you'd like to proceed. So I guess the question I'm going to ask is, would you like to defer this project or would you like to keep it in the budget? Councilmember Stewart?
Keep it in.
Councilmember Farr? You're muted, sir.
Defer it.
Councilmember Saper?
Defer.
Councilmember Tull?
Keep.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Keep.
Councilmember Clark?
Night of the information, keep.
Councilmember DeLong?
Keep.
And Councilmember Smith?
Keep it.
Okay, so I'm hearing a consensus to keep that, so we'll plan on that. And then the last item that you talked about in the gaming fund for possible deferral was the Purina Mill demolition. Is there any more discussion about that?
Okay, so for staff, legally, where are we on this? I mean, have we exhausted all our options and now we're just waiting to see what the new owner may do?
We need to come to you with a real procedure for proceeding. As I indicated, I think we've come to the realization that we're not going to get any owner to tear that structure down. So if that's something that the council wants to do, then we probably need to come to you with a plan for acquisition and then figure out what we think that the cost would be and proceed that way. So right now we're not very far down the road at all to answer your question.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, Brian mentioned a new owner. Is there a new owner? Or is it still the same guy that don't have a penny to his name?
There've been a couple of owners since that person, Councilmember Stewart. So this is somebody else that apparently has acquired it very recently. I don't know what his resources are, but he had enough to buy.
What is his purpose? Do you know that?
No, sir. We don't. We need to have a discussion with him about what his intentions are.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Any other questions about this? All right. So the question would be whether to defer this item in the fiscal year 21 budget or to keep it. And again, I'll ask Councilmember Stewart.
Take it out. Defer it.
Councilmember Farr.
Defer it.
Councilmember Saper.
Defer.
Councilmember Tull.
Defer.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Defer.
Councilmember Clark.
Defer.
Councilmember DeLong.
I'll be that one. Keep.
And Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I think we should keep it too, but.
Okay, but there does seem to be a consensus to remove that item from the fiscal year 21 budget. So we will plan on that. So the direction we have from council is to remove the town square renovation, the community development, office remodel, and the Purina Mill project. So with that does conclude, as I said, we should consider these on a fund by fund, and that concludes the gaming fund projects that we're going to go over tonight. And so if you're ready, we can proceed on to the transportation fund projects that are in the budget. And I'll ask Pat Hubbard to do the next three items.
Thank you. The first item is curb, sidewalk, and drainage improvements, $280,000. This is an ongoing project that occurs every year, and it's a replacement of curbs, sidewalks, and stormwater drainages, and repairs throughout the city. One of the most expensive but most necessary repairs is the replacement of old brick catch basins, which can cause local flooding because they're all the bricks end up in the gutter line. Any questions?
Councilmember Saper and Councilmember Tall.
Would this include new sidewalks?
Well, in some cases, yes.
Because I know that we have at least one street in Ward 1 that has no sidewalks.
Oh, this would not be able to cover that. The amount in this project is just to repair. We do repair sections of sidewalks, but to install a block of new sidewalks would bust the budget on this.
If that's a project you're interested in, sir, you might send us the information. We can take a look at it. It might be something we could look at for next year's budget.
Okay.
I think Councilmember Chol was next.
I was, but I noticed I'm a little bit ahead of where I need to be. So I'll raise my hand in a couple things.
Oh, okay. Anything else on the curb, sidewalk, and drainage improvements item?
Okay, we have the Streetscape grant program with $16,000. This is a pretty popular program throughout the years. It was created in 2017. Gives local business owners in commercial and industrial districts an incentive to improve landscaping within the right-of-way along their businesses through a dollar-for-dollar matching grants up to $5,000. Improvements installed and maintained by the property owners. Most commonly, it's shrubbery. We also would consider irrigation systems to support the shrubbery. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Saper.
Yeah, how much of that project is subscribed on a year-to-year basis?
Well, we published the project at the first of the calendar year, and it kind of varies year to year, and sometimes we'll get more than 16,000, for instance, say 25,000 worth of requests that do qualify. So when we do that, we reduce the larger ones that would have been a $5,000 match and reduce it back so they can all be included that year.
Well, I think this is a good program, and I'm wondering if you're actually budgeting enough for that.
Well, it's based on, yeah, we started out in 2007 and we had 35,000 budgeted and spent it every bit of it. And then slowly the projects weren't coming in, applications weren't coming in. So this amount, 16,000, is pretty much how much the projects that are coming in the last couple of years.
Okay.
Was there another question on this item? All right, and the next item, Pat?
Annual tree planting and replacement program. Each year, dozens of new trees are planted as infill from areas where trees have been removed or in areas along the street right away that can benefit from shade. In 2021, we plan on replacing several trees, the emerald ash borer that were removed. They're going to be removed for the emerald ash management program.
Councilmember Chol.
This is where my question goes. Walking around town by the Wheelie Park and then by Fayette and a couple more streets, there are some newer planted trees that are dead or dying. Mm-hmm. And they even had a tag on one of them. They're autumn flame trees. I don't know if they have a bug or a fungus, but my question is, when you plant trees, is there a certain amount of time that you have to swap them out if they die, like let's say in the first year? And are there any grants that we could use to help put more trees out and around the city?
Well, first of all, the small ones that die, sometimes they just can't make it through the summer. And most of the reason they die is they're not getting watered. We try to put watering bags on a lot of our new trees, but they die. On the other hand, the contractor has a 1-year warranty. And so in November, he'll have to replace those trees that were planted this year and died.
Okay, because they all look like the same type of tree and they're all looking dead. I know trees are expensive, especially when you're getting them that height to start with. So would it be good to put in the budget to have someone with a water truck that can go around and water those new trees until they get a little bit bigger and survive?
Well, actually, our municipal services crews do water them as much as they can. But when we plant one in front of a residence, for instance, We give them a letter and ask them to please water to help this get through the summer.
Okay.
But those that are located in more remote areas, you know, sometimes they die.
Well, like there's at the Wheelie Park, the entire row of new trees are all dead or almost dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that would be city property.
Yes.
So
And you
Pat,
think
can you
it's-
take a look at those trees and see if, because we just planted a bunch of new trees last year as part of a project in the park, and that they may be part of that planting, and they could we check and see if those are under warranty?
I don't know if you can see that or not, if I'm in the right spot, but that entire row of new trees on the Wheelie Park are all dead.
Mm-hmm.
And they look like the dead trees on Fayette, so I'm assuming they're all the autumn flame trees.
We will look into that and make sure they either are replaced by our contractor. And if we replace them, we'll make sure the water bag's on them. I just not familiar with the what efforts have been doing to keep those watered at that location. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Pat, when the city goes to plant new trees, say they're, you know, on a street line in the neighborhood, is there any discussion with the person who owns the property there before a tree's planted?
Yes, there is. We send out a letter a couple weeks in advance and tell them that you're on our list to plant a tree. And if you have any opposition, you know, they have over a week to give us a call.
Does that go to the address in question, or do you find the property owner specifically?
It goes to property owners.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So if no more questions, we'll move on to.
Hold on a second, Pat, if you don't mind. All right. So again, just going fund by fund, we only listed 3 projects in the transportation fund, but any concerns about any of those before we go on to the water fund budget? Okay. And Pat, I'll start on this one if you don't mind.
That'd be good.
The water treatment plant rehabilitation. So I think you're all pretty familiar with this. We've talked about it. This project will actually be on your next agenda on September 15th for award a contract. And I did send out a memo a few days ago in which I indicated that we have sufficient funds here with the amount that's currently shown in the fiscal year 2021 budget of about $13.9 million to fund the project, but not a contingency. And we do feel that we should budget a contingency amount, of course, for this project, because it is a very substantial project, and it's predictable that items will come along during the course of the project that were not foreseen. And so the engineer for the project has recommended a 10% contingency. And in order to achieve that and get to the amount that we think should be necessary to fully fund the project, we are asking for an additional $1,438,494 to be transferred from gaming to the water fund and then be spent from the water fund for this project. That would increase the amount of this project to $15,316,745. And with your permission, we'd like to make that change. Any questions? Councilmember Clevenger?
So on the 13,878,000 for the water plant, I know we got that number several years ago. Are we still confident? You said you're pretty confident in the contract that's going to come in with that, and then adding the contingency on top of that. But when did we last get that $13.8 million number?
So the 13.9 million.
Yeah.
We added about $1 million to the amount that we had in the budget last year because we got bids in early August, and at that point, we realized that the low bid was more than we had budgeted a few years ago, as you say. And so we did add that, but what we didn't do, which perhaps we should have thought of, was to add an amount for contingency. And so that is what I'm asking you to do tonight, is to budget an amount for contingency on top of the contract amount. You understand? Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions on that? Pat, anything else you wanted to say about this project?
Well, I think the council may be knowledgeable about the scope of work, otherwise I'd read it. And I do want to say the amount budgeted includes the amount for the owner's project representative, who's planned to work approximately 20 to 30 hours per week.
It does include that, and that's a contract that the council awarded back in June. All right. Well, Pat, would you like to move on to water repairs?
Yes, sir. Water pump station maintenance. Well, pardon me.
No, water repairs. I think is
water repairs. Water repairs includes water breaks, but also it includes our valve replacement project, valve exercising program. And so we have been going over budget for the last couple of years since we began this project, especially this year. We don't mean to, but sometimes you just, and we want to continue with the project. So $500,000 is proposed this year. Hopefully I certainly probably won't be coming back with a budget amendments at that.
Oh, don't say that, Pat.
Okay.
You never know.
Yeah.
I would like to note one error in the narrative here. It says this line item will only be used if events occur that require it. That's actually not true. This line item is for both planned and unplanned repairs.
Okay.
We will fix that narrative in the final budget.
Okay. Going on to water pump station maintenance. The water pump stations at Sunny Hills and Vernon Street are essential for continuous water service to the hospital. Both pump stations are old and continued maintenance is essential to ensure they function properly. $20,000 is in the budget for that. Water meter replacements, $15,000. We started the water meter replacement project in 2005 when we realized that older water meters don't show the readings, they slow down. And so to be fair to everyone and to attain more revenue, the program began. So this year's funding is to replace water meters that are over 9 years old. And the $15,000 in water meter replacements appears in the water fund and in the WPC fund because it's the meters that we determine how much the sewer bills are. Water plant and maintenance repairs. Although the water plant's going to undergo major rehab during this year, the equipment still needs to be maintained until the project is complete. This is an amount for maintenance and repairs that become necessary during the course of the year at the city's water treatment plant. Well cleaning and maintenance, $50,000. The city's water supply wells lose capacity due to sand, gravel that infiltrates the wells over time. In order to maintain properly pumping capacity, the wells need to be cleaned and inspected periodically. 1 or 2 wells are cleaned each year. Now, part of the program of the contract that we will include renovating wells, but for now, we're not sure when that's going to happen. So this is in there in case we have to renovate them before the contractor gets a chance to. Replace a 2006 Ford 250 truck with a Ford 350 truck, $60,000. The current F-250 is a 2006 model with mechanical and electrical issues, and the salt used when clearing ice and snow is too heavy for the suspension. This vehicle is used daily and is used in the winter months for plowing and salting roads. And it would be replaced by the 350 with snow gear, snow plow gear, and safety lighting.
Councilmember Farr and then Councilmember Tall.
I'm assuming this is a 4x4 truck since it doesn't stipulate.
Yes, it is, sir.
And it's spec like the other one. I mean, it's all inclusive.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Tall.
That was going to be my question. Is it like the other one? So there's two trucks that are serving the same purpose, but coming out of two different funds. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No further questions. We'll go to Sunny Hills water meter.
Oh, excuse me, Councilmember Smith on the truck.
Yeah. Is there any reason this one's 10,000 more than the other one?
Well, there you go. All right, I'm looking at my notes
So
here.
Pat, well, here's a question. Maybe I'm going to venture an answer, and I don't know if this is the answer, but Pat. So earlier, Councilmember Farr asked if the truck that was in buildings and grounds included snowplow and snowplow gear and safety light. You said it did, but it didn't mention it in the narrative, whereas this one does. Is it possible that the one you were thinking about before, was this one, which includes some additional gear that's not included in the building and grounds item? Because both are F-350 4x4s, as Councilmember Smith points out.
That could very well be that we're using the other from the one that we want to get rid of. Maybe we're using their snow plows, and we have to still put in hydraulics and safety flashing lights. I just can't say for sure.
Okay.
But that's something that you'll have for next week when we look at it.
You'd like an answer to that question next week?
I mean, if it's possible.
Okay.
It's confusing when it looks like the same truck and there's no real clear reason that one would be 10,000 more or less than the other. So
all right,
yeah.
We'll get an answer for you tomorrow and provide an answer to you so that you have that answer when the budget's presented to you next week.
Okay. And Eric, it sounds like you're right. I think in one case we're replacing a 350 with a 350, and this one's a 250 with a 350. Maybe the plow and snow equipment from one is transferring to the other.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but I certainly can't say. But if I had to guess based upon the description, I would think that might be what the explanation is. But we'll find out for sure and let you know.
And I'm sorry I couldn't answer that question. Sunny Hills water meter. $35,000. There's currently no meter on the discharge side of the pumps at Sunny Hills. Therefore, staff cannot accurately measure the water flow from this station. An 8-inch meter would be installed at Sunny Hills water pump station, which pumps water from the reservoir to the Vernon Street pump station. Maintenance shop floor drain. We upgraded the shop in 2019, 2020. It was found that the floor drains do not properly drain, permitting standing water mixed with food waste and cleaning water. This contributes to a pooling and smelling conditions. Saw cutting the concrete floors, removing the existing damaged pipe, installing new PVC pipe throughout the maintenance building would be required for restoration. That's a $35,000 project. Fire hydrants and appurtenances, $20,000. This for the purchase of 10 fire hydrants and associated repair kits and extensions to have in stock. The current practice is to order them as needed when a problem is developed, but this leads to delays in addressing the immediate issues. So we just want to stock up on them. Building maintenance and repair.
Well, hold on a second, Pat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Skip
again, just real quick, going again, fund by fund. So aside from answering the question about the difference between the two trucks, which we will get an answer for you to, don't believe I'm hearing any concern about all the water fund projects that are included. Okay, So now we will move on to the last fund that we'll be talking about, and that's the Water Pollution Control Fund. Okay, go ahead, Pat. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Building maintenance and repair. The WPC facility is very old and unexpected repairs are common. This line item is to provide annual funding for unexpected repairs. Moving on to emergency sewer repairs. This is amount to cover costs of emergency repairs to sewer lines, which include both storm sewer and sanitary sewers, including the cost of street excavation and restoration that may be necessary are also included. Over the past 3 years, there's been an increase in storm and sanitary sewer repairs, making it necessary to increase the cost projection. So I won't have to come to the council with as many budget amendments as before. I would say none. Pump station repairs. This is an amount to cover costs for emergency repair of pump stations. The city's pump stations are well maintained, but pumps and electronic components can fail and be damaged by lightning at any time or by wear and tear. That's $100,000 budgeted for that this year. Redevelop landfill monitoring wells. I just want to say this project was funded in 2020 and it was inadvertently included in this year's budget. So we just skipped that.
Actually, I'll jump in. I purposely did include it because I wasn't sure we were going to get it done by the end of fiscal year 2020, but we are taking bids tomorrow. So we do expect that we will probably use the fiscal year 2020 funds for this project, but I'd recommend keeping it in just in case something happens with the bids that we take tomorrow and it's necessary. I just didn't want to have to come to you and say, hey, you know, as we've done before, say, well, we didn't budget for this year, but you didn't spend it last year, so it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to make sure that it was budgeted. So I'd recommend keeping it in, but it's possible that we'll be using the fiscal year 20 funds and not the fiscal year 21, if that makes sense. But Pat, do you want to describe the project?
Oh, yeah. Well, in 1987, the city closed our sewage treatment facility. And throughout the years, we took the sludge and hauled it in big trucks from the sewage, that's part of the sewage treatment process, and hauled it up in an area just south of Harris. It's called, we call it the old sludge landfill area. It's right up near the river. And then we abandoned it when we went with Kansas City to treat our sewage. We tore down the plant and we had to go through the DNR, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and they required us to start to monitor it. And every quarter, our crews sample, and we have a company, an environmental company, do the testing, and it's sent to the DNR. And so we recently, or I should say, a year ago, it's been over 20 years that we've had this, and generally, if you're monitoring wells are 20 years or older, you can get relief, and they'll let the DNR will let you off the hook. And so we officially were asked for one and applied for abandonment, and the Department of Natural Resources said, well, your monitoring wells are so degraded, we're not getting adequate readings to let you go. So they're making us build new ones. And there'll be a contract at the September 15th council meeting, and it'll be about this and the installation of those. SCADA addition, $40,000. The installation of SCADA equipment at the Lynn, Jasper, and Howell pump stations will include an auto dialer to add additional input and output for motor control center. This will provide connections to the computers that monitor stormwater levels at the pump site and allow staff to stop and start pumps to avoid electrical spikes. No questions. We'll move on to meter Water meter replacements, as you recall, we just spoke about that in the water fund. They cost share, same program, $15,000. That's a total of $30 for meter replacement. Bedford Sanitary Sewer Pump Station, chain hoist, $25,000. This project is to replace the existing 2.5 ton capacity manual chain hoist with upgraded motorized 5 ton capacity hoist. The hoist is used to remove and reinstall sewage pumps from the basement of the Bedford lift station. The existing hoist is manually operated with a lifting capacity of 2.5 tons. The pump motor weighs over 2.5 tons, and pump companies have recommended installing a hoist with a minimum of 4 ton capacity. So that's what we plan to do. Okay, Bedford Pump Station.
Hold on a second, Pat. Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, quick question. And actually, I didn't catch you on the water meter replacement. So I just want to make sure you said that's a cost sharing between the water fund and the WPC, and it's 30,000 total.
Yes, sir.
And is that for residential, business, or is it a mixture of the two?
Yeah, it's all businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Residential businesses, commercial businesses, and industrial.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bedford Pump Station Headworks.
One second, Pat. Just as we noted before, the lab water filtration system project will be deducted from this budget. Okay, thanks, Pat. Go ahead.
Sewer gases have eroded the concrete around that floor hatch, foundation doors, walls at the Bedford Sanitary Pump Station to the point where structure is deteriorating. The floor hatch is especially bad as the steel framing is deteriorating and make it an unsafe work site. This project is to replace doors, the access hatch, the concrete flooring at Bedford Pump Station headworks area. $50,000, much needed project. Any questions? Replace fencing. This project is to replace approximately 560 feet of rusted, overgrown fencing with overgrowth on it, on the east side of the WPC building. Over the past 2 years, portions of the fencing around the WPC property have been replaced due to overgrown vegetation, rust, and vandalism. This year is no different, with approximately 560 feet of fencing needing to be replaced. Fencing is a security issue, given that the fence is located adjacent to the railroad, where the homeless and vandals can have that easy access. And they do try to access it, causing damage. Any questions about that? Next is dredge Hillside Levee Creek at Ozark Street Culvert. Okay. An agreement between the city and the levee district in the 1970s required the city to dredge sediment underneath the culvert every 2 years to assure the flow in the creek was not obstructed. The reason they did that basically is the city wanted to build a street up to Sunny Hills for that new complex, the apartment complex. And so that for us to cross the levee, this was a requirement by the levee district. Laboratory renovations, $100,000. This has kind of been pushed back and said no to for a couple of years, but this year we're going forward with it. Hopefully, if council agrees. The WC laboratory was partially renovated over 27 years ago, and a major renovation is warranted to include, but not limited to, replacement of light fixtures, replacement of ceiling tiles, installation of new vinyl flooring, restoration of the restroom, and installation of new cabinets with chemical resistant tops. I think several of you have been on a tour to see the laboratory area and may agree that it needs an upgrade. Okay, I'll move on to construct roof hatches for pump stations. Some of the storm pump stations were constructed without roof hatches. That makes it very difficult and in some cases impossible to remove a pump with a crane during emergency pump repair situations. We faced this year at 26th Avenue Pump Station. We had to remove, the pumps failed and they had to remove the pump, but there wasn't a hatch in the roof to remove it. So the building must have been built around the pump. And we have that in a couple other places. So this project will allow for construction of 2 roof hatches at approximately $30,000 per station. And we would be back next year asking for 2 more to be installed. That's the end of my presentation.
Yep. So that does, thank you, Pat. That does conclude all the projects in the Water Pollution Control Fund. Any concerns about any of the projects in the WPC fund about including those? All right. And that does conclude all our presentation of all of our capital projects that are in the budget. And so you have indicated a number of projects that you've asked to be deferred. And you had indicated some last week as well. And so it'll be our intention when we present the budget to you next week to list all of these so you can see all of the adjustments that you've indicated in the work sessions, and they'll be reflected in the resolution to adopt the budget that'll be before you. So at this time, I'd like to ask the council if you have any other items in the budget that you'd be interested in discussing changing, or any other questions about any part of the budget that we can try to answer for you before putting the final budget before you next week. Councilmember DeLong.
I just want to thank staff for putting this together and you, Eric, for laying this out like this, and definitely making it easy to read and putting plenty of explanations in here. So thank you for that. And also thanks to council for definitely always bringing unique perspectives, all these different items. I appreciate having all this different, all the different knowledge that we have here. So thank you.
Is there any other input?
Move to adjourn.
Right.
Second.
Is there a second? If there's no objection, then I guess you all can consider yourself adjourned. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, staff.
29.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call Ms. Copeland.